Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 27, the fun topic of accountability. All right, so Devin Curtin has been working with Lenzi in Fort Lauderdale for a few years now. Started off at the ripe, tender age of 18, so came in very young, and a few years later, so took a minute, okay? Probably a little longer than expected, but listen, when you're 18, you're coming in, you're pretty raw, and a lot of growth has been happening, and Lenzi has been super impressed. He says, especially over the last 6 months, Devin has really blossomed into a fine young man. And so come late July, we're expecting a promotion to ownership. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. You're going to be running a corporation. So I'm very excited for you, Devin. I'm pumped for the whole crew in South Florida there. You guys have been doing amazing, some strong and great leadership out there. So keep up the great work. And so you ask a great question. I think what makes this great is the second part of this question. So here goes. With your experience coaching leaders, how do you hold people accountable? And here's the kicker. Also, how do you maintain being liked at the same time? And so I want to throw just a quick little story because this is worth pondering on. Years ago, I really thought I need to improve in the world of accountability. So I started the gauntlet of who are all the successful people I know who I think are really good at holding people accountable. They're running great teams. And so I'm asking everybody that question, how do you hold people accountable? I'm getting some great stuff. And I end my journey talking with Gary Polson, and I asked him the question, so how do you hold people accountable, Gary? And there was a long pause, and he says, I don't think I'm the right person to ask. I don't think I'm very good at it. And I'm like, what? I mean, if anybody'd be great at this, I saved you for last thinking the best is going to come from you. He says, I don't think I'm very good at it. He says, I only really hire people that are highly self-accountable. And I'm very lucky that my children are also very self-accountable. So I don't really have to hold people accountable. That was a little bit of a light bulb that went off in my head. I'm like, oh, maybe I got this wrong. Maybe I've got to hire highly self-accountable people rather than improving on my accountability. So again, that might be a time and a place for another episode, if you will. Again, self-accountability, that one's interesting. But let's just go down the path of how do I hold people accountable? And to your point, without really losing the relationship, be liked at the same time. And so I'm a big fan of sports. I've been very lucky over the course of the last 20 years. I've been to some unbelievable sporting venues. I've seen the Stanley Cup hoisted a couple times. I've been to some NBA championship games, and whether it's live or whether it's on TV, I've just always been intrigued with when it's all over and they're all exhausted and the players get the microphone and they've got to talk about the coach. I've noticed a couple common denominators every time that a championship player is referring to their coach. And I'm sure any of you that are big sports fans, you'll be nodding like, this is true. They love the coach. There's a genuine hug and some love happening between player and coach every time. There's been a lot of time spent, off the court in the relationship building that's going on between those two, between the player and the coach. So there's love for the coach. The coach has love for the players. And they'll always reference like, oh yeah, and you don't want to cross the coach. He was tough on us. They didn't become a championship team by the coach being soft. Okay, the coach is tough. So there is this relationship between like a drill sergeant, tough, and being like their best friend. And there's a balance beam to walk and be really good at. How can you be great at creating and building that relationship and still being tough and pushing people? I think that happens with all championship teams in sports, and I believe that to be true in our business as well. So I'm going to do my best to answer your question. I think that there are 5 elements here. I've got 5 bullets for you on really how to hold people accountable and be liked at the same time, all right? So let's start off with number 1. expectations. There's got to be clear expectations from the get-go, at the very beginning. Now, people might not understand all the work it's going to take to achieve these expectations, but what I don't want is I don't want surprises. People don't want to be surprised. Like, you're pushing me and you're holding me accountable. I didn't know this is what you wanted from me. So I've always said this. It is not a system if it's not on paper, if it's not typed up. Okay? If we're running our businesses and teaching via folklore, I think of what life must have been like back in the good old days before Gutenberg invented the printing press. I mean, education was passed on to people through, sitting around singing around a campfire or something like that with a guitar or something. I mean, but as soon as Gutenberg created a printing press, the whole world became a lot smarter real fast. People started to read. Information was accessible. And so it is not a system if it's not digitized or printed. So print it. The standards and expectations needs to be clear as day. So for years in my office, I've always had a dry erase board and an accountability board, and right in between the two was black and white taped up there, the standards, the expectation. And if and when the expectations changed, okay, whether it's a client change or, we got to change the performance for whatever reason, well, so did that document get changed because I wanted people to know crystal clear, this is what's expected of you, okay? So start off with that. There's a nice military term of expect and inspect, okay? So there's got to be an expectation and there's got to be the follow-up. You got to follow up on that expectation. If you're missing the inspection, well, the expectations, it loses its power. So there's got to be an expect and an inspect, okay? So that's number one, is be very clear with the expectations. Number two is relate. Relate to poor performance, all right? So when I was new and I was screwing up, okay, and I was not setting the pace, I expected, for whatever reason, that my leader, Rob, would come down on me. Like, hey, you're not paying attention. You're not doing what I told you to do. But instead, Rob would nod and he'd laugh a little bit and he'd share a story of how much he sucked when he was new. And that always made me feel better, and that always made me want to get back and try again. So I'm sure you've heard this before. What it takes to perform is skill, and it takes will. Skill and will. And so for new people coming in, the skill isn't there. The will can be there, but if the skill's not there, the performance just isn't going to be there. So to make people feel at ease, I want to relate to what it was like. Hey, you might see a polished version of me now. It's because I've got the skill, but before the skill came, dude, I can relate. I was all over the place. So I think people appreciate that. I think they like that. So be relatable. You haven't always been, and Devin, you started at 18. You were a piece of coal before you became a diamond. So relate to what that was like. That'll put people at ease. That'll put the guard down. Laugh about it. We've all sucked at some point in time, so relate. Skill and will. When skill and will are there, performance happens. Okay? Very simple little dynamic of the relationship of skill and will equals performance. All right? Then number three, and I have found this to be extremely powerful, is our people call their shot. Okay, so in the accountability board, okay, it's a dry erase board, the accountability board. You set your goal. You set the goal. You don't come into work and me, the boss, I'm setting everybody's goals. Here's what everybody's expectations are. Now, again, I've got a minimum expectation, yes. But you, every individual, walk in and you set the goal. You set higher than the minimal expectation. That's always what happens. Here's my targets. I've reflected. I put some thoughts into my goals for the week. Here you go. And I've always used a black marker for that. Here's my goals for the week, black marker. Take it to the bank. And then as the week goes on, you're grabbing two different colored markers. A green marker for trending up. Hey, I'm ahead of my targets. And a red marker for trending down. I've always, for years and years, I've always wanted to run my business that for every one red marker. I've got 3 green markers. Like if I'm running out of red before I'm running out of green, there's a problem. If I'm running out of green way before I run out of red, good things are happening in my business. Okay, so you call the shot. I'm just holding you accountable to what you said you were going to do. And so every day there's some accountability. Hey, are you up? Are you down? Are you trending? And you can go over it quick, just as long as the reps are putting their information up on the board in red or green, and they're holding each other accountable. It's visual. It's there for everybody to see in the office. I've been to real estate firms, car dealerships. I mean, all the numbers somewhere in that business are exposed for everybody to see, and they're highlighting the success of what's happening in their business. So don't be shy to publicly put those numbers up there. Ideally, I want everybody trending green. So you're calling the shot. I'm just holding you accountable to what you said you were going to do. Or I'm helping facilitate the process. Maybe holding you accountable is too strong of a term, but I'm just following a system of just keeping everybody on track for what they said they were going to do. So each rep calls their own shot. The number 4 is the leader is setting the pace. The campaign manager, whoever's running that campaign, has got to be a pace setter. Okay, so I've referenced this a few times. I love that documentary, The Last Dance, right? So I grew up a huge Jordan fan, Bulls fan. I remember as a youngster, the Bulls people that didn't watch Michael Jordan growing up wouldn't even really know this, I don't think. I mean, he was kind of known as a choker in the playoffs. Like, they just wouldn't win. They could not get past Detroit. They'd have a great regular season, then when it comes to the playoffs, they lose. Jordan is on a losing squad. I mean, obviously we know him as the GOAT, and like 6 out of 6, times to the finals they won. But that wasn't always the case. So again, I found it fascinating watching The Last Dance of just bringing back all these great memories. And, Michael Jordan's leadership was somewhat under the microscope. A lot of people would say, yeah, listen, Jordan was too tough. Like, he was a jerk. He was other colorful words. And he gets emotional too when he's talking about it. Like, he's brought to tears, I believe, in like episode 7. Like, hey, this is just who I am, and I don't have to do this. And, but they would say, all of his players would say, Michael would never ask them to do something that he wasn't already doing himself. The players would be, getting massaged or something like that after a big game, and Jordan would be the guy coming into practice and flipping them off the table. Like, listen, I put 46 minutes into the game yesterday. Like, what are you doing getting a massage? Let's get out there and practice. So he was tough on people, but listen, he had a voice because he was setting the pace. So it's a lot easier to hold people accountable when you're doing the behaviors and the actions that you're asking them to do. Imagine how difficult it would be to hold people accountable to doing something that you're not doing. I think of the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, and you've got the Kevin Spacey character, the manager of the firm, who's this kind of cheesy, not respected guy by the sales reps. Look at him like, just give me the Glengarry leads. Again, there was just no respect because he wasn't walking a mile in their shoes. So you're in the trenches with them. You're like a player's coach. Remember, one of the championship seasons with the Lakers, and John Sally was on the bench most of the time. And I remember, again, when they won the championship, and John saying, listen, I'm worth my salary here. I think he was paid like $1 million a year, and he got minimal playing time. But he was like a player's coach. He had the experience. He knew what it was like winning championships. The players respected him because he was one of them, yet he was still a player. He technically wasn't a coach. So I really look at the campaign manager as you are that player's coach. You got to set the pace, and when you perform at a high level, you can expect more from your people, and they'll listen as you're holding them accountable. They're like, he's right. How do you argue with the guy? He's asking us to work harder. Look at what time this guy showed up. Look at how late this guy was in the field. Look at the numbers this person's, putting on the board. Hard to argue with that success. So the speed of the pack is determined really by the speed of the leader. So again, set the pace. I couldn't emphasize that enough. And then number 5, and maybe this is again back to, MJ in The Last Dance, those crucial conversations. Step 5, the crucial conversations. There's a book called Crucial Conversations, and it really talks about how most people, when they're confronted, when accountability happens, they resort to either fight, they're going to get aggressive and fight, and I don't like what I'm hearing, or flight. They're gone. Peace. See you later. So you've got to create a safe environment where you can engage in a crucial conversation. If the performance isn't happening, we need to have some dialogue. Now, is it publicly in front of a bunch of people? Generally speaking, that's not real safe when there's a bunch of other people there. I would say it's a one-on-one environment, and to make it safe, I would just be very curious. Instead of walking into that conversation judgmental and like, hey, what's going on? Hey, I'm really curious. Like, this doesn't seem like you. We had all these big expectations of you, and you just seems like, you're just not really performing at that level. I'm curious, why you think that is. You've got to seek first to understand. Think about it. You've got 2 people that just aren't performing. One person, when you peel the onion, when you get into the details, when you seek to understand, hey, listen, I'm just up really late. I'm playing video games late at night. I'm partying with my college buddies. We're drinking a lot of alcohol, and this is why I'm not performing. I'm just really tired. You might handle that individual different than the other individual who says, yeah, I'm under a lot of stress. My wife and I are going through a divorce, and this is the hardest time I've ever had my entire life. Poor performance, 2 very different people, and you're going to handle those 2 differently. The only way you'll know that is by being curious. So engage in those crucial conversations. It is okay to ask. It's okay to say, listen, you set the goal. Again, back to step 3. You called the shot. You're performing at half that capacity. I'm just curious why that's happening. From your perspective, why do you think that is? And just sit there and keep your mouth shut and listen. And a lot of times people kind of talk themselves through kind of what's going on. They need a sounding board. A lot of great athletes, a lot of great players just need a sounding board. I've heard that, people like the Tom Brady's of this world, would call people like Bill Belichick late at night just to get nerdy and idiot savant like just talking about plays. But Brady got to get nerdy with Belichick at some crazy hours, like 2 o'clock in the morning. Kobe Bryant was the same way. A lot of these genius people just need sounding boards. They need great listeners to get to the spot they need to get to figure it out for themselves. So again, crucial conversation. So I hope that helps, Devin. Those are my 5 tips really on how to hold people accountable and keep that relationship, how to be liked in the process. And again, I think there is some wisdom to what Gary said. Hey, listen, I don't know if I'm the best guy to teach you accountability. I hire highly self-accountable people. So we'll save that for another episode on what those individuals look like. But have yourself a great day. I'm excited for your promotion, and all the best to you, Devin.